causing the pain and suffering, you really have to pay attention. They are claiming to be solving the problem while at the same time punishing you, and then expect to be like praised for that action. I left a link down in the description to like literally a 1-minute video coming from the Secretary of Agriculture. I believe it's Brooke Rollins is her name. Anyway, in this interview, she is talking about bringing the price of food products down. Like, that's her job. She needs to figure out a way to bring food products down. And when you hear some of the things that she says, she's talking about bringing the input cost down. And what was one of the major input costs besides like fuel and energy? Labor. And she admits it. We are bringing the labor costs down. That's your wages. Like, that's your wages. That she is talking about being one of the input costs that was too high, causing the food prices to be elevated. She brings it up saying there was 46% wage increases, or labor, like the cost of labor going up. So when I think about what it is that the administration is trying to do to control the inflationary scenario, just think about what the Secretary of Agriculture said about the food products out there and what it is that they are trying to do for the farmers in bringing labor down. That's your wages. Wages do not keep up with the standard of living that we now face today. And she is saying those high wages, that labor input was a problem that we face within this nation. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, that is a very huge disconnect comparatively to those who have and those who have not. She is saying that the labor costs going into the food products is the reason why they are so expensive, and that labor cost needs to come down. And when she says that, she is literally talking about the wages that the working class individual is earning. This is how major of a disconnect, disproportionate, and like literally two views of the economy taking place at the exact same time. I mean, I've never heard anybody who had literally like given such like, okay, I'm so kind of frustrated. Let me like bring this down a little bit. What she had done is literally told you of a situation in which that the painful experience that we have received as working class individuals is needing to persist going into the future in order to solve the problem of inflation. This is sad to hear. We are supposed to compliment her on this idea that they are going to be bringing the input cost for farmers down by destroying the wages. I mean, is that literally what it is that needs to happen here? See, is it the working class individual who just earns too dang much inside of this economy? And that we are the problem with creating an inflationary scenario? Because that's the way it used to be. If there was a lot of people working and a lot of people putting that effort and time and energy into the economy through the purchasing of goods and services, the supply-demand imbalances would create an inflationary scenario that does not exist today. That's not the way it works anymore. There was a time it did, and you could say, yes, all the wage growth, all the labor, all that stuff that was happening created an inflationary scenario, but that came to an end after the great financial crisis with the flattening of the Phillips curve. It's something that the Federal Reserve is willing to admit to. But yet here this game is played, where they're talking about how it's your problem with earning way too much money, creating the inflationary scenario that we now experience within this economy. You see how they are focused in on the issues of the labor market when the labor market itself doesn't contribute to the inflation anymore? It's not them who are doing it. It hasn't been them for a very long time. The flattening of the Phillips curve has proven that. The consumption has taken place at the top 20%. They're the ones who are doing it. They're the ones who are consuming. The bottom 80% of people do like 25% of the consumption, 30% of the consumption. They ain't consuming enough to create any difference within it. That's why their wage growth isn't the problem. The problem is the separation between the rich and the poor, between those who have assets and those who don't. That's where the major problem is. And as they attempt to try and push down on the labor, on the wage growth, in order to attempt to create an inflationary scenario that is then coming in line with their expectations of target, We are finding the most painful experience amongst the working class. It doesn't need to be there. It has to come down to those who are consuming. By consuming, you create the supply-demand imbalances and you find an inflationary pressure that comes from it. That is happening up at the upper 20% of household incomes. Think about it. How can you have consumer sentiment be in the toilet, the worst since like the great financial crisis, while at the same time have a resilient consumer? Two things are happening at the exact same time. If you ask 8 out of 10 people what they feel about the economy, they're probably going to give you a negative view. The sentiment is in the toilet because 80% of the people are suffering in this. 20% of the people are really enjoying it. And so as they're really enjoying it and continuing on with their consumption, we see this major divide that has taken place. How is it that we deal with the inflationary scenario? Well, in the past, we used to have to push down on the labor, the input cost, all the wages that are going up. That's not the problem we face today, but yet here the Secretary of Agriculture says that's what the problem is and that they're going to solve that problem. You see how this is going down? They blame literally, okay, this is something else that I found very interesting. I never listened to the Biden administration. I didn't listen to a single word that Joe Biden had to say. I didn't even understand anything he was saying anyway. So it didn't matter. I didn't listen to him, and I had no interest in hearing anything he had to say. But this is something that I found funny, is that the Secretary of Agriculture said that, hey, we inherited this problem from Biden. Right? And one of these problems was this incredible wage growth that took place that created all this inflationary scenario that the Federal Reserve had already admitted did not create the inflationary scenario. The flattening of the Phillips curve proved that. Flattening of the Phillips curve proved that. So here it is. She's admitting that the Biden administration created a scenario, which I don't believe he created or they created. I think it was one that was coming up from the COVID era pandemic and the usefulness that the Federal Reserve found within it, but it doesn't matter, right? They said that Biden created this situation, and part of that situation was elevated wages. Holy crap. She admitted to like most people wanting that in their life, and that he delivered it, and that it was the problem. Really? You're going to admit to that? I mean, aren't you wanting the people to be on your side? And yet this is what you deliver for information, is that Biden caused all these wages to go up. Wasn't that nice for you? And that created a major problem, which the Federal Reserve said didn't do. Right? How do you guys want to look at this stuff? I don't know, man. I mean, everybody has to take a different view on what it is that's happening out there. But when I listen to this 1-minute clip coming from the Secretary of Agriculture talking about one of the major problems that we are facing within the food inflation was labor costs going up, I find it very interesting that she says she's solving that problem. No kidding. You think wages are keeping up with the standard of living? Of course they're not. The only time that it actually stopped decreasing was during the Biden administration with all the stimulus checks. And I guarantee you that was not a good event. That created more problems within the future, which we are experiencing right now with ever increasing amounts of inequality. That was not a good event. Most people don't see it. They don't understand it. They just want to look back there and say, oh, whoa, the Biden administration did this wonderful thing with all these efforts and all this time and all the contributions to the economy, which did not manifest into anything except more of the same, which is inequality, more war, and more debt. All right? That's what ends up occurring. You might hear the frustration in my voice on this, but then again, when I hear what it is that she exactly said, the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, what she said is like, it's so telling of how it is that these like rich elite really see the average everyday person. You earn too much money. Your wages are not enough to keep up to even an attempt to get close to the American dream. They say something about, hey, we're going to bring good manufacturing jobs back to the United States. Here it is. We have a manufacturing job. It's called agriculture, and we have wages within it that were apparently too high for them. Too high for you. Yeah, we're trying to help you bring the food prices down. You earn too much. I'm sorry, you have to be punished for that. But in the meanwhile, our asset prices are going to continue to increase. Yay for us, the rich elite. Okay? And here we are supposed to be thankful for them? I don't get it. Like, I really don't get it. I don't get anything that these people are trying to deliver that seems to be somewhat of a benefit to the people, when all I see is pain and suffering going into the future with their efforts. The people who recognize this and say, yeah, that ain't going to help, that ain't going to benefit me, I'm on my own and I'm going to have to make my own decisions. And part of that is collecting the assets that I need in order to have a decent way of life going into the future, much like the rich elitist had done. When I take in that kind of consideration, when I believe that is the motivation and expectations of me and my efforts going into the future, and not expecting my wages to keep up with it, then guess what? Most likely, I'm probably going to have a strategy that might be somewhat successful. But everybody else who was sitting around thinking, man, we need to figure out a way to bring this inflation down. Secretary of Agriculture, what's your idea? Yeah, you guys earn too much. That's the problem. Maybe if you didn't earn so much, this food wouldn't cost that. Do you ever think about that, maybe? This is literally the same. I mean, she didn't say it in those words, but that's might as well have been what she said. That's why I find it so hilarious. Like, they ain't coming to help you. Look at what they said that they're going to do to try and help. I mean, anybody says that they're trying to help, just think about that. This is what they're going to do. They're going to cut your wages. They're going to make your wages not be worth enough. Then, inflation will come down. Yay. No. No. Because the wages that are being earned by the working class people are not what's contributing to the inflationary scenario. They don't consume enough. There's 80% of them do 30% of the consumption. They're not doing it. Right? The consumption is happening at the top 20% of people. They're the ones who create the inflationary scenario. They're the ones who continuously pump the new money into the system. They take out the debt, they buy the assets, they get the cash flow, and they spend the money. Everybody else is just trying to serve burgers, drive trucks, pour beers. That's what they are doing. And trying to figure out how it is that they can position themselves with little money they get from their wages in order to buy an apartment, buy a car, buy, anything decent in their life. And they struggle further and further behind, because this is the unfortunate circumstances of ever increasing amounts of new money that pours into the system. It's called the Cantillon effect. Right? It's pretty easy. I guess I'm frustrated with that statement. She literally just straight up says, hey, we're going to solve the problem by pushing down on labor. Labor means your wages, wage growth, right? So she's going to push down on that, or at least that's the expectation, and they're doing it. Straight up, they're going to do that. And then at the same time, the real problem is not in the wage growth of the people, because they don't contribute to the inflationary pressure. The problem is up there at the 20%, but they are going to avoid that. That is not going to be the problem that they're going to focus in on. That would be them. They're going to focus in on you. You're the problem. You're the one who has issues, not me. Right? That's what they're saying. All right. When you pour, it's always inflammation. All right. Let's cruise back here a little ways. Well, we're 13 minutes into this. Everyone on Snap EBT now. Who would like quality of life to be like our grandparents enjoyed? Single family home on one income with 3 kids, middle class, was vast. Yeah, and it was also an exchange of your skills by producing things that were awesome for the rest of the world to buy. That was a different time. It was not the way it is today. I also listened to something earlier today. It was actually an article that I was reading. And part of this was talking about this supposed silver tsunami that's going to be coming to the housing market. And something I found interesting about this comment that they had made within this article was essentially the fundamental collapse of the demand within housing, right? And I'm thinking right there. That's the issue. The demand for housing is low. Ultimately, they were saying, if you do not buy a house, then you're not going to start a family. If you're not going to start a family, then there's no need to buy a house, right? So these two are kind of working together. They blame one as the other. The cost of housing is the reason why people don't want to start families. But that's not necessarily it, because Cantillon described it from hundreds of years ago about what it is that's really happening, and it's the cost of living, the standard of living being elevated. That's the problem. Nobody wants to lessen their standard of living in order to raise kids. But if your standard of living doesn't diminish by having kids, then you'll have as many kids as you want. So this is the problem with having an elevated standard of living and the cost of living being elevated, is that it's very expensive to have kids, and this is the reason why people don't do it. He describes this. Poor nations are willing to have as many kids as they want because they're not going to diminish their life by having kids. Like, diminishing their life would be death. So it's just like they can have as many kids as they want. And this is the problem that we face here in this country, is because we live a very luxurious, high standard of living, which makes it difficult to raise kids in. I know, I have too, right? And so thinking about it in this fashion now comes into another way of thinking about the housing market. People are not going to necessarily want to buy homes. If they don't want to buy homes, why do builders want to build homes? They don't. Builders want to build homes for people who want to buy homes. But here we have a fundamental demand problem within the housing industry. And when we think about what it is that's going to be taking place going into the future, unless you have an increase in demand for houses, then the builders are not going to be excited about getting new houses. Now, yes, you can maintain a house for essentially forever, but houses deteriorate over time. And if you do not have more homes coming in to meet the population demand that is going to increase going into the future, you're going to have a deterioration of homes. Now, that is not something that a lot of people have considered. And if you are not interested in having a home, the demand being low, think about the builders not wanting to build, and you think about the one person who would be interested in that sort of environment. If they are not if you're not interested in buying a home to live in, if you're not buying a home to raise a family in, and you're not buying a home as an investment, who is buying a home? The investors and the entrepreneurs and landlords out there. You got to have a place to live somewhere. You're going to be paying rent if you're not buying. And if the buyer demand is dropping, there is a demand from buyers somewhere. Who? They are going to end up buying those properties and renting them out, because that's how it goes when you have an abundance of money in the system. It's not that people don't demand homes. They literally can no longer afford them because their wages as a working class individual doesn't cut it anymore. There was a time when it did. There was a time when you could buy a piece of property, go down, get a permit for it, and construct a house on your own, and it didn't really take that much skills. You had to have some skills, some carpentry understanding in order to get the house constructed, but they were not that difficult. There's just a piece at a time. That does not take place anymore. Tell me, how many people out there could have provided homes for the nation just simply by building them themselves? That era is gone. Why? Because we're not a manufacturing country anymore. We're not the manufacturing state like we used to be, and we don't share those skills with each other anymore. All right? The only thing that we share with each other is debt issuance, payment of those debt issuance, and beers. All right? The saws are not part of the game as much as they once were. And don't get me wrong, we manufacture in this country. We manufacture a lot of really good stuff. In fact, we manufacture in a lot of ways more than other nations do. But the problem we face is that we import a hell of a lot more than we export. And if we're importing stuff, we're exporting money. And that is the goal of the whole financial, monetary, world reserve currency system, is to get that money out there to the world. And the best way to do it is to run deficit trades by importing stuff and exporting money. Now you have plenty of money out there for everybody to use to start doing transactions and paying off their dollar-denominated debts. Very difficult task to get through. How long are we into this? 18 minutes. You guys having fun? Let's read some comments. 191 people watching. Keep hitting that like button. Continue to share this video and commenting. It's the best way to get the algorithm to send this thing around. Deja vu. I asked my son if he wanted a brother or sister, and he said, no, just friends. Do you ask your son for investment advice? This is the decline. I have enough. Good for you. I asked my son for investment advice. He said, buy Sony. Bad advice. My son lives in a new 15-minute city, rentals only. We have to buy all the stuff, otherwise some other country would buy all the stuff and they would have all the control. They wouldn't buy all the stuff because they don't have the debt issuance to buy all the stuff. You got to understand, like, the only reason why we are even able to buy the stuff that we do is because we are paying with empty paper promises to pay into the future with more empty paper promises, and the empty paper promises are most widely accepted form of collateral in the entire globe. It's strange to think. U.S. Treasury debt, the United States government debt, which everybody is just constantly warning about, saying, oh man, this stuff is bad news, don't want to be messing with it, don't touch it, is by far the most popular form of transaction that anybody had ever contemplated ever existing. It's the biggest, widest, deepest market, most liquid market in the entire globe. And so when people are doing transactions in dollars, generally they're doing it with US Treasuries. There is no other nation that can provide the world with the amount of safe and liquid assets like the United States has done, because there's no other nation that's going to be willing to go into debt as deep as the United States has done. There's no other nation that can buy their stuff. Even if they wanted to, they can only buy a little bit because there's nobody who's willing to give them the debt, give them the money to buy. Nobody's willing to buy their debt to give them the ability to buy that product. Only the United States holds that. No matter how much people don't want to believe it, it's the case. It's the truth. It's just all there is to it. Go and Google it for yourself. How much U.S. Treasury debt is held by foreign investors? There's more now today than there ever has been. And the reason is because there's more debt to hold. No other nation can do this. No other nation is going to be trusted enough to, I mean, are you going to put your entire retirement into the Chinese government bonds? How about Brazilian government bonds? You're going to do that? No? Nobody else is either. They're going to trust the United States treasuries. The treasuries are plentiful. They're very liquid. If you want to sell or buy a treasury, it's instantaneous. There's very little doubt. And when it comes to doing transactions, there's very little currency out there that can even come close in quantity that the United States is providing for them to do the transactions with. If it didn't exist, they wouldn't be doing transactions and everybody would be starving and dying. Don't, like, it's just, that's it. You know, there is no other nation that can do this. Now, I'm not saying, like, hypothetically speaking, that there wouldn't be a nation that could do it. All I'm saying is that there isn't. There isn't one. There's no nation out there that anybody trusts enough to go that deep into debt and to promise to pay it. Only the United States holds that, and they don't even really hold that. People don't like the idea of it. They're like, man, this is a terrible idea. And it was like, yeah, but there ain't no really other choice. You know, and it was like, you can like it or not. It doesn't matter. There's nothing else. All right. $5 from, what is that? Sam Balas, 3947. Thank you so much for that $5 super chat. Very kind of you. Does it benefit elites that the working class can't afford children? Are they setting it up so they can replace us with AI? No. What is happening is that it's the abundance of money that pours into the system, and that certain people are going to be industrious, hold back on their expenses, deploy that extra money into some sort of secured rate of interest of return, and then separate themselves from everybody else because they have that rate of interest that's coming in beyond their occupation. That is the separation, right? As simple as that. Just a very simple understanding of what has taken place. Industrious people postponed buying into expenditures, right? They didn't increase their expenditures on anything. They earned this extra money, you know, all the money beyond the money you're already earning. And they took that extra money and then they put that towards something that was a secure rate of interest of return beyond that of their occupation. Did not increase their expenditures, took that and elevated themselves up. These are the asset holders, whether you did it with property, you did it with stocks, whether you did it with bonds, did it with business, did it with something, you did some sort of thing that elevated yourself up out of that. That is the separation, because there's also going to be a group of people who eagerly work to acquire that what it is that they need in their life, but not provide any extra beyond that which is their necessities. Those are the two groups of people. Some postpone increasing their expenditures, earn extra money, put that money towards a rate of return, right? Get that elevated interest off of it, get that elevated money beyond, their occupation, and then there's a bunch of people who will spend that money but will not try to earn any more than what it is that they need to live. Right? And that's the difference between the two. So it's not like the rich are trying to create a situation in which that people cannot afford it. What has taken place is ever increasing amounts of new money has poured into the system through debt issuance, which people beg for. Don't think that the poor people beg for it every single day. The government ought to. The moment that they say that, the government ought to, what they are doing is firing up ever increasing amounts of debt and sending themselves even further down the wedge. They should never, ever, 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 under any circumstances, ask for the government to do anything unless they are planning on being separated from the rich. Then they should go ahead and ask the government for whatever they want, right? And then they will find themselves ever increasingly further down the line. I know that's sad to think because people don't want to believe that, but that is exactly the case because that's how it's described from hundreds of years ago. If you inject new money into the system, you will separate the rich from the poor every single time. By bringing that new money in, what is happening is that people who have access to it elevate their standard of living. By elevating that standard of living, you are increasing your consumption. That increase in consumption creates supply-demand imbalances, and now you have price increases, and the people at the end of the line suffer the most from it. Now, this is not an elite plan, although they may have planned accordingly. This is not something that is planned. This is due to the fact that ever increasing amounts of new money constantly pours into the system. Every single time somebody says the government ought to do something, you are literally telling the government to go deeper into debt and separate the rich from the poor even more. You can recognize how this is actually happening and then position yourself accordingly for it. Right? You have to know that if you want children in your life, you're going to have to do way more than a day job. Because the day job isn't going to cut it, unless you just want to be incredibly poor, right? And then, okay, maybe, you get some tax breaks or whatever. I mean, but it sucks, right? That's no way to live. So if you are willing to earn a lot of money and then cut back on your expenses as much as possible, drive like a 97 Suburban and don't take out any kind of debts and don't go out and buy a bunch of fancy toys and stuff like that, well, then maybe you can earn enough to actually raise some kids in a decent way. But you have to be very conscious of that and then very aware that if you go buy the truck, it's going to get very difficult. Right? And this is the plan. This is the plan that you have to take. The rich didn't plan for you not to have kids so that they can replace you with AI. Cantillon describes why it is you're not having kids. It's because it's too expensive and you don't want to lower your standard of living. That's why. That's it. People who live in poor countries are willing to hold on, let me see if I can find it. People who are willing to live a lesser life, right? To hold back on, let me see if I can find it here. I've shared it with you guys in the past. I have my computer. I could probably look it right up. Oh, how late are we into this? We got 27 minutes. All right, I'm still going. We're good. Money spends now. It doesn't save anymore. Only the few save. If you are single, rent, invest more. Start with a pet then. Ambulance, it's true. Plus, U.S. is developing an affordable child care with a catch parents will have 2 used and AI-created nanny services developed by Musk, the AI nanny, to be golden. Yeah, I don't know about any of that stuff. All right, let me see here. The increase and decrease of population of the state. Where's that at? All right. Page 85, is that it? I thought it was before that. All right, page 85. Let me try that. Oh, hey, check it out. Uneducated Economist stickers. I didn't even realize they were in there. All right, here we go. The increase of population can be carried furthest in the countries where the people are content to live the most poorly and to consume the least production of the soil. In countries where all the peasants and laborers are accustomed to eat meat and drink wine, beer, etc., not many inhabitants can be supported. That is something that Cantillon was describing from way back in the day. So if you are poor and not really actually needing that much in your life because you don't have anything in your life, then you're going to have as many kids as you want because it doesn't devalue, it doesn't push down on your existence anymore. If anything, it would elevate it because maybe one or two of them might actually be successful and help you along, right? This is the problem that we now face within this country, is that there is no way that they are going to be able to get in people in a position in which that their day job is going to be enough to provide for the entire family again, which would put people in a position in which that they would be encouraged to have kids, because it wouldn't push down on their life, it would only elevate them. Now we are in a situation in which that it would be very costly to have kids in your life. I know, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, having kids is a wonderful experience, and it's sad that people, and a lot of people now, will not be able to enjoy that experience in a way that is like what they had maybe even remembered as a child themselves, or heard about from years ago in the great American dream, and having the highest standard of living here. It sucks, I know. I don't like it to be this way, and I'm not trying to say this is like, I'm not. I don't like it. Right? It's not up to me to like or dislike. It's up for me to see it, recognize it, and then try to figure out how it is that I can plan accordingly for it. 212 people, thank you so much for joining in on today's live stream. 67 likes. Do me a favor, with 212 people watching, we should have that like button up to over 100. 67 people, go hit that like button right now, and we'll get the algorithm to spread this around even more. We got another 15 minutes here, we'll go. All the people, mostly women, who voted for NYC socialism are fully consumed by luxuries. The city is doomed. All right. Oh, I think that's kind of a big accusation, but whatever. We can just kind of go with just the idea of people who are voting for the socialism or socialistic ideas. Thank you very much for the $5. I really do appreciate the support in the comment. But let's kind of think about that for just a minute. When you have so many people who are suffering the consequences of having their wages not be able to keep up, and this is the problem that we are now facing going into the future, is that it's going to get worse, right? The wages that right now would be enough will not be enough going into the future. It's a diminishing effect that is happening within these wage growth not keeping up with the standard of living, right? And now we recognize that we don't have to pinpoint and say, man, it's this fault or that fault or anything. Cantillon describes it. It's going to happen regardless of who it is that's in office. It doesn't matter if it's this political party or that one. I know a lot of people will disagree with it. That's fine. It's easy to then use politics as your focus, your viewpoint, your guiding light, but underlying economic forces say much differently than that. And what we will find is this separation causing people to then demand that something be done. This is a major problem. The moment that people demand the socialistic idea that we need as a whole to get together and force these other people to give up some of their fair share, you're going to find some very harsh realities coming from that. You might find, this is what's kind of crazy about it, is that you might find a blip in time in which that it does work for you, like, hey, 10 years of awesomeness, all right? And you can see how, like, maybe the benefits of people who have forced this outcome into existence, but there is nothing that's lasting, and it won't last, and what you are doing is setting the future up for failure. Now, that is not an easy thing to try and understand and believe, especially if you have taken on such a confirming belief of how it is that the rich elite could pay their fair share. When you have confirmed that in your head, it makes it very difficult to then understand that the underlying economic forces are playing out and the damaging effect that will come from that effort. Right? It really focuses, you really have to take the focus down to yourself and what it is that you can do considering the current economic environment that we are in. And part of that is not blaming other people or expecting anybody else to change their behavior. Right? Because that stuff will not happen. You are the only thing that can change. You can change your understanding, your view, and what it is that you need to do in order to acquire the things in your life to separate you from the working class individual, because that working class individual, as strong as they were at one time in this country, is not going to have a job that is going to be able to provide them with enough to have the American dream. It's sad. I get it. I don't like it. I don't want it to be that way, but it's not up to me to want or wish or dream for it to be any different. I have to accept it for what it is and then decide what is it that I'm going to do. And part of that is sharing with you on this channel exactly what it is that I see happening with these underlying economic forces. And when you have people out there who have come together and say, hey, no, as a whole, we can make a difference. We can wish and dream and hope and pray together that there is something that we can do to make this hope and change work for everybody. And then we find the results of it being absolutely opposite of what it is that we had expected. Why? Because you can't change the underlying economic forces. You cannot. Once you recognize them, once you see them, once you have internalized it, you will then accept it the same. You will then look at this world in a much different fashion. You'll think, okay, how is it that I can position myself in a way that I can cut back on my expenses, increase my flow, which is starting side hustles, starting businesses, getting into dividend paying stocks, doing rental incomes, doing something out there that gives you a position that you can then acquire a secure rate of interest beyond that of your occupation. If you do not do that, you can expect to fall behind. It's the unfortunate circumstances we have now elevated into. Right? So it doesn't matter if those people voted for him. It doesn't matter. It's all symptoms of the ever-increasing amounts of abundance of money that is coming into the system. What you see, that voting, that political environment, those are symptoms. Don't think about it as being the cause. That's not the cause, right? They would never have existed in the first place if it wasn't for the ever-increasing amounts of new money. So they are definitely a symptom, not a cause, right? Now, they will make all kinds of little issues happen that you'll say, oh no, look at what they did here, here, and here. But again, none of that stuff would have existed if it wasn't for the fact that there's new money constantly pouring into the system and the underlying economic forces as a result of that. That is the most important part. All right. Do you think eventually it will be too much even doing those things? They will close the paths to wealth. No, it won't be, because if you put yourself in the position of being in the cash flow by buying into assets and then you ever increasingly go that position with it, then no, you are going to be, it's literally going to be shaped like that, like the K, right? The people who are in assets are going to find themselves ever increasingly in a position in which that they get to enjoy all the food, conveniences, and pleasures of life, while everybody else who is expecting their wages to maintain are going to fall down into the abyss, wondering why it is that their good job that once was a good job is no longer providing them with enough to have a good life, right? So no, the asset holders are very few. You got to think, very few people do that. More and more are starting to do that because you have the availability of buying in with Cash App or Robinhood or something like that. So it makes it a lot easier to start positioning yourself in that way. But very few people do it. Very few people do it. Most people will live paycheck to paycheck, have debt issue, like take out debt to meet that of their wages, and then never have any extra beyond the money that they're already making in order to move into assets. The majority of the people will not do that. Right? And because of that, there's no way that they can keep up. And so, no, if you are doing that and you are successful, and you might have to get punished a couple of times in your learning process of buying into stocks or real estate or something of that nature. Like, I mean, nobody's going to hit it out of the park every single time. You have to learn just like everything else. You know, failure is first attempt in learning. So understanding that is part of the process of getting on that other side of the wedge. But if you do not attempt to try and get into assets or property or something, businesses, then you can expect that your wages will not keep up and you'll fall into the abyss. It's just like, I wish it wasn't that way. I really don't. But once I recognize it, once like I learned from Cantillon's essay on economic theories, on what it is that's actually happening with the flow of money coming into to an economy, and what ends up taking place with the separation and the manufacturers leaving and the ever-increasing amounts of foreign production that comes in, I'm thinking, man, I can't expect that to change. I'm going to have to figure out how I position myself to do that. And if I don't get into assets and hurry, then I can just expect that that my wages here and stuff like that won't do it. Like, I won't be able to keep up. It will fall behind and it will fail. And even my wife is now at 50 years old trying, not trying, she is going to get a teaching degree to increase, her skill set, her, education in order to become more of an industrious person herself. Right? And this is like the path that you have to be on. If you are not on that sort of path, if you are hoping to be stagnant from now on, then you're going to fail. Like, I'm sorry, like maybe somewhere out there in some part of the country, you might be able to have a factory job that will continue on into the future where you can show up every single day at the right time, go home, not pay attention to anything else, put your money into retirement, and have an awesome existence, just like they used to talk about being the American dream. There is probably some place, somewhere in this country that you can do that. The majority of the people will not be able to do that. That is not necessarily a common thing anymore. All right. I'm paid whatever people are willing to pay me. We have had to start our own business so we could set our own prices. And the salaried path doesn't get wage increases that keep up with inflation. There you go. Skills pay the bills. Would you say the Cantillon book is the most important book on economics? I wouldn't say it's necessarily the most important. Like everybody asks me, is this like, is that the most important one? I wouldn't necessarily get it into the most important. I couldn't tell you what the most important one is. What I like about Cantillon's essay is that it's the oldest. It's the oldest one, as thorough as he put it, right? He tried to describe 200 and something years ago. I don't even know how long ago he was. It was back in like the 1700s, if I remember right? Late 1600s something. Anyway, very old essay. And even Adam Smith came after. Like Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, like that's probably one of the most important books when it comes to economics. Like to be honest, I tried reading The Wealth of Nations, and I was having a hell of a time trying to just even stay focused in the book itself. But from the people who, from the reviews of The Wealth of Nations, it's probably up there as far as one of the most important books to read. But when you read through Cantillon's essay and the 3 chapters, right? Increase and decrease of money to the state and the further reflections upon that topic, though part 2, chapters 6, 7, and 8, go and download the essay for free off of the Mises Institute and read those 3 chapters. You read those 3 chapters, if you do not get a good understanding of why it is that we are now suffering in a manufacturing state of ever deterioration, I don't know what could. Like Cantillon describes it exquisitely. Right? Now, if you don't want to go and read that, we did a video on it just a couple of nights ago where we broke down those 3 chapters word for word. I mean, I literally gave my input and and thoughts and everything as we read through every single word of those 3 chapters. So you can go and listen to it and get a good understanding of what it is that's happening within our country, especially when it comes to the manufacturers. It's all due to luxuries, right? It's that luxurious experience that then sent us into decline. And this is going to happen every single time that you have an abundance of money that pours into the system, and there's literally nothing that you can do to change it. It's because it comes down to human nature. People want to enjoy the new money. Like, why wouldn't you want to enjoy it? Of course you do. The moment that you enjoy it, the problems begin. All right, I'll check it out. Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody should, and I mean, you can buy the essay off of Amazon and I'll get a little commission off of it. That affiliate link down in the description will do that. But you don't have to buy the essay. You can get it for free. If you do click on that affiliate link, anything you put in the cart that you buy from Amazon, I will also get a commission on. Just click on that affiliate link first, fill up that cart over the next 24 hours, and then make the purchase in the next 30 days. And it's an awesome way that you can support the Uneducated Economist just simply by doing the regular purchases you already do, right, through Amazon. Just click on that affiliate link first. All right. And especially coming up into the holiday seasons, there's never a better opportunity to do that. So you're going to probably hear me talk about that on every video. All right. Family of 4, 140K is considered poor here in California. That's crazy. Well, I always thought, how much time do I have left? All right. I got a minute left here. I always thought that 100, like when I was growing up And even going into my adult life, I thought $100,000 a year would just be amazing. Like if you had $100,000 a year, then you would have everything that you could ever possibly want in your life, and there wouldn't be any problems whatsoever. And then I realized that ain't gonna do it either. $100,000 is hardly enough to even buy in. Like it's not even enough to qualify for the loan to a house. Like maybe somewhere you could get one, but for most houses, the average, 100K ain't gonna cut it. You can't. It won't be enough. And so that's crazy to think. In my mind, it was just like, damn, I thought, man, if I could get to 100K, that would be like that would be the ticket, man. I mean, and not all the money in the world, but man, it would be so awesome. It would be, everything would be like, would be cool. I would have a house and cars and, all the things. And now that I see what it is, that ain't even enough. And it won't be enough going into the future. And if you don't double that, it's probably going to leave you behind. And that's scary as hell for a lot of people. I mean, I know, I think about for my kids, myself, like after I'm gone, what is it that they're going to be experiencing, man? If I do not position themselves in a good way to then continue on with the accumulation of assets, then I can just expect them to have a very difficult, a difficult experience. The day job won't be enough. It isn't now. Why would I expect it to be in the future, considering the underlying economic forces that are playing out? It's scary and sad at the same time. All right, guys, I'm gonna go. I gotta go back to work. Continue to hit the like button. Hitting that like button gets the YouTube algorithm to spread it around. I appreciate everybody who has shared the videos, all the emails. I've gotten quite a few emails. I'm sorry if I don't respond to all of them. I try to, but I get a lot of emails from people who are thanking me for, especially when I did the 3 chapters the other night. I got a lot of people who emailed me and said, thank you for doing that. It gave them such a better understanding. They got, like, a lot of people tell me that when they hear about how those underlying forces separate the rich from the poor and send the domestic manufacturers out of the nation due to the ever increasing amount of luxurious experiences, when they hear it described out through those 3 chapters, it's like they get that aha moment that finally they're like, oh, I get it, why it's not working, why it's happening, why the wages aren't. It's like all of a sudden it's just like it becomes clear. It's not fun, right? It's kind of depressing in a way, but then once you have the understanding of it, it's not like it's depressing anymore. You know that it's, it's sad and scary, but that, you can do something about it because you recognize why it's taken place. Once you recognize why it's taken place, you have a better understanding of what it is you need to do, right? But a lot of times it's just blamed on politics, and that's unfortunate because politics is a symptom of the underlying forces. It's always has been. Cantillon described it before there was politics, before there was politicians. All right, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Again, thank you for sharing the video, hitting that like button, and commenting. It's the greatest way to support the Uneducated Economist. All right. This guy rambles a lot. Yeah, but some people kind of like that rambling. All right. The channel is really good. Thanks, yeah. You should have kids in the U.S. unless you have at least $1 million in your investment portfolio. All right. Understanding Rome fell is also pivotal. Yeah, and I mean, again, Cantillon describes what was taking place then. Like, they essentially fell into luxuries. It was the luxurious experiences that send them into demise. Yeah. All right. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know. Thank you all night for being here. I really appreciate you and Brody and all the hard work you guys do for the channel. I really do, man. Thank you guys very much.